Today I'm going to be mixing up some concrete to put around some of our wood posts on our fence that we've been working on. We've got one corner post that hit just right in the middle of a hole that some armadillo had dug, and rather than relocate that post, I decided to just drive the post in the hole and come back and fill that in with concrete. Most of the posts for the fence I've drove with the backhoe and the tractor, but before I started doing that, there were a few posts that we put in where we dug a hole and put the posts in, so I need to go back now and fill those up with concrete. And when I was a kid growing up on the farm, my dad and I would always fill posts with the Quikrete or the Sakrete that you would get at like Lowe's or Home Depot. But like everything, you know, those have gotten expensive, and you know, a bag of concrete doesn't go far. So rather than buying the sacks of concrete from the home stores, I'm going to be mixing up some concrete here on the farm, and I'll walk you through that. So you can see here that I've got some gravel. Back a couple years ago, I had a dump truck load of gravel delivered, and I've done a couple different things with that gravel. I originally got it so that I could fill the flower beds because my wife wanted gravel in the flower beds instead of mulch, so I got some of this river gravel for that. And then here beside it's my sand. But then after I did the flower beds, I still had a good bit of gravel left, and so I began to use that to do some different projects with concrete. Here's actually one of those things that I did. So this is a little patio area that is outside our basement, and I just used some little frames that I got from Lowe's or Home Depot to pour this. But all we're going to need out of here is just a wheelbarrow and a shovel and a rake, and we'll mix this up when we get out in the field. All right, here we are on the field at our post. We've got everything in the Ranger that we're going to need, and we're going to go ahead and get that unloaded, and we'll be ready to mix this up and start pouring. Today I'm going to be using a classic ratio for the concrete mix. It's just going to be a 1-2-3 mix, and I'm going to mix that by volume. If I was mixing it for strength, I'd use a weight ratio, still use the 1-2-3, but since I'm just going to be filling this hole and steadying this fence post, volume will work fine. And that's going to be 1 part cement powder, 2 parts sand, and 3 part aggregate. In this case, I'm going to be using those river stone. It doesn't take very much water, and I'll pour this one a little wet because I want to get it down into the hole, make sure that I get all the voids filled. So the first thing I'll do is add my aggregate, and again, it doesn't have to be precise for what I'm doing today. I'm just going to measure it by the shovel scoop. I'll get that aggregate into my wheelbarrow, and then I'll add my sand on top of that, again just by the scoop. With my sand and my gravel in my wheelbarrow, the last thing I'm going to add in there is my cement powder. And for today, the only cement that I had been sitting outside in the bag for a while, and it had kind of set up, so we didn't want to make a run to the store. We actually used a hammer and busted that up. It's got some pretty good sized chunks in it, so I just put about half of what I had left into the wheelbarrow and made sure that I had enough of the powder, but whatever bigger chunks were left over just become part of the aggregate once I add the water. And I like to mix everything up dry, make sure I've got a pretty consistent mixture before I put the water into the wheelbarrow and mix that up. And then when I start adding the water in, I'll mix it until I get it to a point where it's going to flow pretty good. For the water today, I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm not really measuring. I've done this a time or two, so I have a little experience. And I'll just pour a little, make an opening in the center of the wheelbarrow, push all the mix out to the sides, pour my water into the middle, and then start to mix the dry in, just like making bread. Add a little more water. Now, I will say one thing about mixing concrete. As you start to get to the consistency that you're looking for, again, a lot like making bread, the mixture does become very sensitive to water. So as you start to get a pretty wet mix, you have to be really careful about how much water you add, because it's easy toward the end to add too much. If I was doing this for something like a patio or steps or anything like that, I would pour it a lot drier, probably getting pretty close to the consistency I'd be looking for in that. I'd put it into the forms and tap it out, and then look at adding a little water on top of that and finishing it out. But again, since we're not going to be finishing this today, we're going to be just pouring it in the whole set. I want to have a little wetter mixture, something that's going to flow easy, and it's got time to set up for a few days before I actually need to stretch my wires, so I don't have to worry too much about the time it's going to take for the concrete to set up. It'll have plenty of time to get good and hard. Here I'm really just thinking about how wet I want to have it, considering the hole I'm trying to fill, trying to decide if I want to add any more water or if I think this is going to be good enough. And after assessing the situation, talking it over with my dad, we decided to go ahead and add a little more water. We wanted to make sure that this thing was going to get filled up, weren't going to have any voids left, and that we were going to get in all the cracks. So I added some more water and mixed that in, just really to make sure that it was going to flow and fill all those voids. Mixing concrete definitely is not easy work, especially when you're mixing it by hand. Got to have a strong back and a weak mind. Now you can see here just the little bit of water that I added there at the end, how much of a difference that made. This went from something that would almost stand up on its own to something that's about the consistency of a thick mud. You can see how when I push it in the wheelbarrow, it starts to flow back toward the middle. Once I had that mixed up, I just take my shovel and start to fill in around the post. Because I do have it so wet, I don't have to worry that much about the placement of concrete around the post because it flows, so I can kind of just throw it in the hole and let it flow around. But I did want to agitate it a little bit, so I just take a stick and sort of tamp around that post and work that concrete down. Like I said, this post hit right in the middle of an armadillo burrow, so I want to make sure that I've got the concrete down in there, that it's going to fill up that void where they burrowed into the ground. As I was tamping, I noticed that it didn't seem to be using as much concrete as I had expected that it would. It seemed to be filling up a little more than I would have thought. I wasn't sure that I was getting into all the spots there where those armadillos had burrowed out. When I started to work that post, I could see that concrete flowing as I moved the post around. After a minute or so of probing and tamping with my stick, I finally figured out that the void that they had dug was running back up under the ground. And after I saw how far it was running, I decided that I would just open that up a little bit more, make sure that I was getting my concrete down in there and getting all that hole filled up. The hole they dug wasn't huge, but it was pretty good size. They'd made a pretty good void under the ground. Once I had it opened up, I was able to go ahead and fill it in and make sure that my concrete was getting down in all the voids and getting it filled like I wanted it to. Once I started to get it kind of filled, I like to vibrate the post a little bit. It's just another piece of post that I'd cut off, but like to tap around on that post, vibrate it, make sure that the concrete's getting into all those void areas, but also that it's filling in any little gaps and everything around that post to make sure that it's going to bond to that post really good. I want to check it one more time for level, eyeballing it, close enough for government work. Give it one last tamp. Making sure I got that armadillo hole filled up good. Make sure that I got my concrete all down in there and didn't leave any gaps. I don't want my post coming out of the ground when I start to stretch my wire. Once I made sure I had everything filled up, I just put a little more concrete on top. Sort of topped it off there to get it up closer to ground level. You can see there how wet that concrete is. Again, if I was doing something that was going to be supporting, structure that was going to have any weight on it, if it was going to be a footing or even a driveway or a sidewalk, I would have poured that a lot drier. But knowing that this was just going to be filling a hole to hold my post, I was more concerned about having the concrete flow and get down in all those cracks and crevices and not leave any gaps. So one last tap around the pole to make sure that it was all flowing in well, and just using my shovel to smooth everything out on top and level that out. And I'll let that set up and then come back and top it off with some dirt so that I don't collect water around my post. And here it is a week later after it's set up. So it's gotten good and hard. Everything's good there, and now I can fill the dirt in because I don't want to be collecting that water and rotting my post out. Thanks for watching our video. Please give us a like and follow if you enjoyed this video, and if there's something more you'd like to see in the future, leave us a comment below. Also, if you'd like to learn more about who we are and what we do, you can go to our website, and while you're there, sign up for our newsletter if you'd like to be the first in the know and get early access to our farm-to-table products.